Okay, it is July 18th, 2016 at 7:05 p.m. We'll call to order this meeting of the Development Review Board. The first order of business at every meeting we do is a series of opening remarks. If you've been to this meeting before, I apologize. If you haven't, this is where I explain the procedure of the meeting. And in layman's terms, the ordinances and law that govern how we do things here. So if you're interested, and particularly if you intend to speak, please pay attention. At the DRB, we hear applications for land development in the town of Brattleboro and appeals of zoning administrator decisions. Procedurally, the Development Review Board operates on the record. Broadly, this means that we take a clear record of testimony from the applicant and any interested parties, and then issue a written decision with our findings. Applicants and members of the public should be aware that as we are on the record, this is your opportunity to comment on and present evidence relating to an application, and it is likely your only opportunity. In the event our decision is appealed to the Environmental Court, the Environmental Court will not take new evidence. Instead, they'll consider the evidence from the record of this hearing and look at whether we interpreted it and the law we apply to it correctly. If they agree, they'll affirm it. If they don't agree, they'll reverse it. Only interested persons that participate in this proceeding may appeal a decision by this board, so I strongly encourage all of you to speak up at this hearing. As we're on the record, we're going to ask that you affirm that your testimony will be truthful. And the way I do that is I swear everybody in who might wish to speak as a group. If you could please stand and raise your right hand if you think you're going to speak. I'll put you under oath right now. Do you hereby swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give and the cause under consideration will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury? I do. Okay, thank you. If you did not take the oath, but you change your mind and you wish to give testimony, that's fine. I can swear you in at the microphone. If you're not sworn in and you say something, we actually cannot consider it, and the people you want to appeal to down the road can't either. Applicants require a majority vote of the full board to succeed. That's 4 votes out of 7. As you can see, we have 5 people here tonight, and that means that 4 votes out of 5 will be necessary to succeed. However, we have an additional member who generally is willing to review videotape. Is there any reason to think that they have a conflict of interest tonight?
No, there's not.
So it's likely, if you're content for somebody to review the record from tonight on a video that's being recorded right now, that you could have 6 potential votes. However, because we don't have a full board of 7 to hear these applications, if any of the applicants would like a request to continue this until the next meeting, and hope we get 7 then, we generally consider those and are open to granting them. After taking the testimony, the board is going to close the public hearing, and we may vote on your application during that hearing, or we may go into deliberative session off the record to discuss the legal issues that relate to the facts on the record. The board will issue a written decision within 45 days of the close of the hearing. While we may vote on an application at this hearing, it is the written decision and the date on that decision that controls the timeline for any appeal. The town of Brattleboro is sometimes a party with an interest in land development applications. Sometimes they're the applicant, sometimes departments comment on applications, sometimes their lawyer gets involved. The town does not have a special status before this board. We are not the town. We treat the town just as we do any other applicant or any abutter or person with an interest in a land development application. That is, they can put evidence on the record in the fashion anybody else can, and we consider it the same way. But they have no preference. We have minutes to approve for both. Well, is it just the June meeting?
I think so.
It's
Oh, we have 2
20,
June meetings.
Yep.
June 20th and 27th. That's right.
Okay, right.
I'll hear a motion to approve those.
So moved.
Second?
Okay. Anybody in favor? Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Mr. Bannon, has our meeting been properly warned?
Yes, it has.
Okay. Has anybody had any conflicts of interest or ex parte communications? Nothing to disclose?
No.
As I did last time, I should indicate that Mr. Sakosio, who I see is here tonight, who works for Stevens and Associates, helped us design a kitchen. We no longer have a continuing business relationship, and I don't view that as a conflict of interest. So this means that we'll have 5 members for each application, and both of the applicants are here, right? Is there somebody here from Marble? Yes, okay. Pardon me, I'm bad with faces sometimes. If you'd like, we can move forward with 5 here, plus 1 person who is generally reliable to watch the video. Or if you wish, you could ask to continue to the next application, and we'll consider that. Oh, pardon me.
If the board would want to discuss this and get a sense of how the board feels about the appeal, and perhaps then continue it to a full board if there seems to be a continuing controversy.
We can do that too. If you'd like, you can take our temperature and take it from there, and we'll entertain a motion to continue. My apologies to everybody who's here that we have a short board. This is something that is frustrating to me as the chair of the board, but we'll try to deal with it in a way that's fair. Would you like to move forward in that fashion, sir? And who's the representative for the other applicant? Do you guys want to move forward tonight with 5 plus 1? Would you like to sort of see how that goes and leave open the option of a continuance if you feel like you want an additional vote, just as we did with the first applicant?
Yes, please.
Okay. So we'll do that with both applications. The first application is 2016-25. If you could come up to the table, sir. And I think we're all familiar with the general facts of this application, right? So you don't need to go through this again. And we received your letter, which was helpful to us. And we received a piece of correspondence from Mr. Bannon, who's being appealed here. Did you get a copy of that as well?
A copy of the appeal?
No. Mr. Bannon raised a legal issue for this board, and I wasn't sure if you had seen it. It had to do... What's that? Well, how about this?
I had seen it, but I don't have a copy of it here.
Well, what I wanted to do tonight, and if you'd like to tell us anything more than this letter, I'm happy to take any testimony from you that you'd like. But I think it would be helpful if Brian discussed this issue before the board, and then you can hear it and respond to it if you want to. So could you basically summarize the legal argument you made in your email?
Sure. Just a quick review. I refused to issue a permit for the changeable copy sign because it's no longer in conformance with the current regulations, and I couldn't see a way to approve it. After the testimony at the last hearing, where they explained that they considered this was an element of a larger site plan project, I reviewed the land use regulations to see if that changed the situation. The new code does have a section on vested interests, and that preserves the interests of prior approvals even under the new code. And it allows for a smooth transition and eliminates the possibility of perverse outcomes. One of those provisions is that a substantially completed project doesn't need a renewal of the permit to complete minor elements of the project. From the testimony they offered, this sign is a small percentage of the overall site plan cost. It is one element that was discussed in the site plan approval, and it was noted in the decision. So the board should consider whether, in fact, they do have a vested right to construct the sign.
And it was one of the final construction elements as well, right?
That is correct.
Yeah, okay. So it seems to me that we are at a point now where the chronology is clear, and I don't think the applicant disagrees with the chronology. And the question is whether we agree with Mr. Bannon's assessment that this clause, it's kind of like a savings clause or a junior grandfather clause, I guess. What is it called?
It's in the vested rights section.
Vested rights section. The question is whether the vested rights section would support our overturning Mr. Bannon because the applicant had a vested interest in the job in the project viewed in its entirety. And thus, whether it would be unjust to deny this one element simply because the ordinance changed 85 or 90% through the process of that project. Now, do you have anything to add, hearing this for the first time? We don't mean to spring things like this on you.
No, I think that, I think this is what we were thinking when we talked about it
Right.
collectively.
Does anybody on the board have anything to ask either Mr. Bannon about that or the applicant if you have questions about the facts? My thought is, and are there any members of the public who came here to discuss this application? And this relates to the changeable sign down at the Auto Mall if you weren't here for the prior hearings. Okay. My suggestion is that we have a brief deliberative session and then come out to tell the applicant essentially where we stand, and then you can make a decision if you want to continue for the full 7. And obviously, if we agree with Mr. Bannon, my expectation is you would want us to get moving on the decision to approve the permit, right?
Correct.
Okay, so we're going to break for what I expect to be a 5 to 10 minute deliberative session, and then we'll come back on the record for the Holton Home application as soon as we either make a decision or continue this application. Oh, we need a motion to go into deliberative session.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. So we discussed this matter in executive session at 7:20. We're back on the record. The board unanimously concluded that Mr. Bannon's legal analysis makes sense and that the facts support a finding which would overturn his initial decision denying the sign application based on the applicant's engaging in a very large-scale project and coming to the DRB and disclosing the nature of this sign and the elements of this sign and securing the approval through the appropriate process, and then relying on their understanding of that approval under the old ordinances to proceed with a project, and particularly to remove an old sign, which the applicant probably would not have removed if they did not think they had an approval for a new sign. So it was based on those factual considerations that all 5 members of the DRB who are here tonight are in favor of overturning the administrative. Is it an administrative denial or is it I feel like I'm using the wrong terminology.
No, I think that's right.
Okay, overturning the administrative denial of the permit for the colored electronic changing copy sign that the applicant built pursuant to an earlier subsequently withdrawn application, which was 2012
Right.
057. And I think 2012 114 for that matter. So if I'm phrasing this correctly, I suggest someone make a motion to overturn the administrative decision.
I make a motion to overturn the decision.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? I'm sorry, if there's anything you want to add, you can.
No, it's fine.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes 5-0. Thank you, sir.
Thank
Have a
you.
nice night.
Thank you.
It's been a long time.
Yes, and we apologize for the short board and the continuances. The next application is actually our last application. That's 2016-99, Holton Home. So if you folks, I know that we know you, but if you could just identify yourselves for the record and then tell us about your project.
Corey Frazee, civil engineer for Stevens and Associates.
And I'm John Sicosio, architect at Stevens and Associates.
And I'm Cindy Jerome, the director at Holton Home and Bradley House. So we'll tell you a little bit about the project. We all know that our community is aging. The demographics of the older segments of the greater Brattleboro area are growing very rapidly. Holton Home felt strongly that Bradley House needed to continue, that it was something that the community needed. So when Bradley House came to Holton Home last year, asking us to take Bradley House over, ultimately we agreed to merge and move ahead with what we felt was necessary to make Bradley House sustainable and able to continue to be here to serve all strata of our community. So we want to do similar development as to what we've done at Holton Home in order to make sure that the building meets all life safety codes and is attractive to elders who need our services, and also that it can serve additional people, as Holton Home often has a waiting list, and Bradley House does not because of the condition of the facility, but there are people in the community who need to be there. So we are planning, we need to, even if we kept the same occupancy numbers, the same number of rooms, we would need to add space so that each room could have its own bathroom and there are proper support areas and hallways that are wide enough, etc. But we want to do more than that. We want to be able to serve more elders because the need is so great, and the state has made it clear through assessments they've done of this area that the need is great and only increasing. So our plan is a two-stage project to first build an addition and then move all of the residents who are currently in what we call the mansion, the original three-story structure, into the addition. So no one will be displaced from the facility. An article in the Reformer suggested otherwise, so I want to be sure people understand that. So they'll move into new rooms and then we'll renovate the mansion. New electrical, plumbing, heating, fire alarm systems, wider hallways. Every room will have a full bathroom instead of sharing bathrooms. Insulation.
All of the above.
All of the above.
Yeah.
We have single pane windows, we'll be replacing them, and want to end up with something that will serve our community for many, many years to come.
So I'll jump in with some of the details about the zoning application, the site plan, try and keep it brief, and then see what your questions and concerns are. Thanks for having us tonight. We were before you 2 or 3 months ago for a sketch plan review as required by the PUD, and also to clarify that this would remain under the PUD status for the old Bishop House, as I believe it was called. So this is an expansion of an existing facility, Hilltop House or the Bradley House, as you may know it. You're all familiar with the overall location off of Bradley Avenue? Great. There are 28 existing units there. This is going to expand the facility to 35 units with a 36th bed. One of the units will become a 2-bedroom. Didn't I describe that right? Okay. The addition's approximately 8,000 square feet. And as Cindy indicated, it'll be a 2-story addition and then renovations of the existing buildings. So a couple things on the site plan to point out to you folks. And then, you see that all right? The planning department has given me a nice template to kind of run through the criteria. So if you'd like, I believe you have that memo from them, and I'll just kind of go through those bullet points, and there's a couple questions raised that I'll answer. So,
Excuse me, I'm sorry, you said it was Bradley Avenue.
I'm sorry, did I misspeak? Yes, Harris Avenue.
We know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Thank you, though.
So the access to the facility will stay the same. There's 2 driveways that aren't going to change. We are going to reconfigure the parking slightly. The primary reason for that is to formalize it and to add 2 handicap spaces and make access to those handicap spaces meet ADA requirements. We are going to improve access and deliveries to the building. by widening this delivery drive and then creating better access to the lower end of the building. Pedestrian circulation will also be improved. We're going to maintain, there's a loop out here for people to walk. There's an existing pavilion, is that the right thing to call it?
Gazebo.
A gazebo that's out on the lawn. We're going to maintain that loop. But we're also going to add sidewalks along the parking area, bring it around the edge of the property so that there's better pedestrian circulation. Going to enhance some gardens. There's some planting beds back here that will stay. This is going to be a little bit of improved landscaping around the existing mansion. And then in the back, there's new landscaping around the addition. And then this is a proposed rain garden, which will have really nice landscaping and kind of be a focal point of that outdoor area.
What are the size of the pieces of vegetation you're using in the rain garden there?
I can open up the planting list. I was going to go through that a little bit when we get into the landscape.
We can wait if you're going to tell us.
Okay.
I mean, really, I just wonder, are they bushes or are they trees?
There are 2 trees and many bushes.
Okay.
Okay. I probably should have started by pointing out the addition that you did see previously in the sketch plan, but this is the existing mansion in the front of the building. This is an old addition that was done, and this is the proposed new addition here, which is 2 stories, kind of off the back and the side of the building. This is a proposed covered drop-off or porte cochere, where cars will be able to pull in and drop people off out of the weather with a pedestrian connection to the front of the building. We heard concerns at the sketch plan review from the neighbor to the north about 2 things. Visually being able to see the project, and then also about stormwater. And we've added some landscaping here to address the side yard buffers in a location that we feel like will adequately screen some of the building out from the neighboring property. But also there's another exhibit here that adjacent home is quite a distance away, so the scale of the building will be at a great distance to the building. It would be similar to looking at a smaller home in the immediately next door. And then this rain garden is focused on actually collecting more of the water than the previous drainage patterns. It used to just be overland flow along the side of the bank, and now the majority of the water in this vicinity will go to that rain garden. So it's actually an improvement on what was there.
Is that going to be regraded, or will it naturally flow there?
There is a regrading to kind of create direct water into the rain garden. And then the roof is flat, right, John? So the roof collection will come down through piping and connect to the rain garden to collect all the roof drainage on the new addition. There are some owner options for budget reasons. There are a few things that we identify on the plan as owner option, and we hope to build them, but if there's budget constraints, want to make sure you understand that it may not happen. This is an existing gravel parking lot, and we're asking that it be an owner option to redevelop this parking lot with the paving and the site lighting, excuse me. The new sidewalk and curbing along the edge of this parking lot here is also an owner option. And then
Did you say just the curb or the curb and the sidewalk? I'm sorry.
curb and sidewalk, owner option to provide a new concrete sidewalk with and granite curb, yeah. So granite curb and sidewalk there is an owner option. And then the redevelopment of this loop, we're also asking that be an owner option, again, in case we need to find some budget money. Switching over to the planning department letter. Access and circulation, they bring up a question as to whether the driveways cross the property lines and whether easements are needed. We are not asking for any changes to the existing access as part of this permit, but recognize the question's been raised. This is not a formal boundary survey that's shown on our site plans, and since this was the original home in this area, we would imagine that the property lines either accommodated the driveways or there's historic easements that allow for those driveways. I can't speak to that tonight, so if the DRB has additional questions, we can look into that further.
Have both sides been there for a long time?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. The survey we used is reference from 1945. I only received this on Friday. Haven't had a chance to look into historic photos or anything like that.
But that has both the north and the south entry and exit?
The reference survey?
In 1945, were they using both entry and exit for use of your drawing on the left and right side?
I can't be positive of that. Regarding streets and driveways, the applicant should speak to runoff from the driveways. Again, the driveways are existing. We're not proposing to modify those existing driveways. With regards to stormwater and how the current stormwater runs off of there, the rainwater runs off of there, we're not proposing to change any of those drainage patterns. We are addressing stormwater by meeting the Vermont Stormwater Manual. So the new zoning regs, we're using the Vermont Stormwater Manual as our guide for the redevelopment of this property and the requirements for stormwater. Parking and loading, we're proposing 22 parking spaces, including the 2 handicap spaces, which is above what the town has come up with a calculation of 17 spaces, so we meet that requirement. Regarding how stormwater is treated in those areas, there are 2 things going on. A, redevelopment does not require specific treatment of existing impervious surfaces, and there are small areas of new impervious surfaces. This corner is going to flow into this rain garden. There's a second small rain garden here that's dealing with new impervious, and then there's a section of new impervious here which goes across a grass buffer or filter strip, as it's sometimes called, to deal with stormwater. Buffers and screening.
Before we go to,
Yep.
where did the water that came from the other flat roof on the existing addition go?
We think that it's exiting off the back of the bank. There's a manhole on the back of the building that looks like it's a stormwater structure.
I see.
Some sort of clear well or something.
Okay. Sorry, go on.
All right. So parking lot screening, we have added this set of bushes here to kind of finish off the parking lot screening because we have a lot of existing vegetation that's acting as landscape screening from this parking. This parking is a little more of a challenge and a discussion item. It's much different in elevation from the adjacent homes over here, but actually we've talked with Cindy and would like to propose getting rid of many of these street trees. And I want to talk to this further when I get to landscaping. And we'd like to add some more appropriate parking lot screening here to ensure that the headlights aren't shining across the roadway there. I'm going to come back to that in just a minute.
Are those like mature trees? What are they?
We have many mature trees on site. These are all proposed street trees or boulevard trees to meet the landscaping requirements for not only the front yard setback requirement, but also for the street landscaping requirement.
Okay.
They're not in the appropriate place because of the location of the property line. The trees are pushed off the road and they're actually halfway up that steep bank. If you're familiar with the Bradley house, you know that there's a steep bank that leaves Harris Avenue. So they're going to look out of place. They're not going to supplement the street in the way that the zoning code would like them to, and they're not really going to relate to the building. They're not really going to benefit the residents of the building. So they're required to meet the landscaping requirement, and we actually think that if we counted those trees, we'd meet the parking requirement too. But tonight we'd like to eliminate these trees because we don't feel they're appropriately placed. It's an inordinate amount of money, and that money could be better spent up here with an arborvitae species to appropriately landscape the headlights. We'd probably do something that's 3 to 4 feet high. That would block all of the headlights without blocking the views out of these windows. across the street. The building landscaping, there's several sections of the landscaping code. We meet all of those. I'll touch on two very quickly. Sticking with parking, one is a shade requirement. So we are required to shade 50% of the area of this parking lot and 50% of the area of this parking lot, and we have done so just based on the large existing trees that are there. If you have questions, I have the sizes and the crowns of those trees, but we've met that requirement. The building landscaping, we have not met. The zoning code requires 120 EPUs or equivalent planting units. We've provided 110. We've maintained this entire existing back vegetation except for one small area where we're going to have to put utilities down the slope. We have some existing constraints, particularly along this side of the building where we have existing gardens, a drip edge, and an access into a building that we can't really landscape there. We feel that we've thoroughly and adequately landscaped the building with this new landscaping bed, enhancing these beds, and then landscaping around the building. I feel that the rain gardens and the trees buffering this adjacent property are all appropriate, and so we've acknowledged that in our application. We're looking for flexibility on that from you.
Is the 110 including the street trees that you also want to waiver on? Or is the 110
No.
including the arborvitae?
Actually, neither. The 110, because in this category for building landscaping, we only look at landscaping that's associated with the building itself.
Oh, okay.
So this landscaping out here was not taken into consideration. Lighting, all of the lights will be fully shielded or full downcast, full cutoff lights, and including the existing lights on the outside of the building will be replaced and brought up to code. We are not asking for a sign at this time. We would come back to you if there was a sign. We have addressed erosion control on one of the site plans. And then with stormwater management, as I said, we are using the Vermont Stormwater Manual, which is one of the options identified in the new zoning code. So we're doing redevelopment. We are reducing existing impervious by 20% or more. And we are treating all new impervious in the 2 rain gardens. And the planning department asked for confirmation. The rain gardens are 10% of the surface area of the area of impervious flowing to them.
Where are you reducing the impervious by 20%?
In particular, this is all paved.
Oh, I see.
So I actually have a colored exhibit. There's little patches here that are going away, and there's a little bit being added over here, but there's a net reduction in the existing impervious of 20%. I wanted to, I had a page folded over here. Okay. So I think I've hit all my highlights. Did I miss anything that you guys can think of?
so.
Okay.
Okay.
Happy to answer questions.
Questions from members of the board?
How high are the trees that are out along Harris,
The existing ones?
the existing ones?
Yeah. I can't tell you how high they are, but they're actually at the top of the bank, right? So as you're driving by, they're not at the bottom of the bank,
Right.
they're up on the top of the bank. So this
Yeah.
tree is probably 60 feet tall. It's got a 30-foot crown. It's a very significant maple. This is a 22-inch diameter spruce with a 30-foot crown. This is a 24-inch diameter hemlock with a 40-foot crown, a 15-inch diameter maple with a 30-foot crown, and a 15-inch diameter pine with a 30-foot crown. So they're very mature, you know.
So the ones that you're
These.
proposed to, now how
Yes.
tall are those? I'm just wondering
when
about
those
breaking
come-
up the vision of the facility.
Mhm. When those come in and they're originally planted, they're somewhere between 8 and 15 feet tall. They're not
So they're not going to have a real impact
for years.
in reducing
Right.
the visibility of the building.
Right, and that's a challenge we always have because you can't dig up one of these trees and move it. So
Yeah.
you come in and you plant a 2-inch or 2.5-inch diameter caliper tree, and then they mature over the years.
How tall would the arborvitae be? And would you be able, would it screen from the street, the building?
It may somewhat, but Our opinion is that it's a beautiful old building. We don't want to screen out the building. We want the landscape to supplement the building and be in the appropriate scale to the building. So we were discussing this actually being lower, just high enough to block the headlights. You can get arborvitaes that are 15 feet tall, but that would do two things. That would eliminate the view of the building, and it would eliminate the view from the building. On this, there's a fairly nice stoop here. There's large windows there. We don't want to block that view either.
So like 4 or 5 feet?
Yep.
May I just clarify something? Last winter, we took down a dead tree that was just inside the corner where the North Drive comes out onto Harris Ave. So at the extreme left of the, yes. And then in just the last 6 weeks, we took down 2 more that were, one was completely dead. It hadn't thrown out any leaves this spring, and the other very few. And they were, the dead one was in front of the existing parking area. I can't see exactly where you're pointing, Craig.
Yeah, there was one right here, right?
There was one there that we took down.
And then there's another one there.
They're over a little farther, but they were dead. I just want to make sure you realize that. And we had been thinking that we want to put up something to block headlights. We've really tried to address some of the concerns that neighbors had about lighting, and that's one thing we wanted to do, so.
What's the snow storage or snow removal plan?
We have several areas identified for snow storage. This whole inside curve here will be an area where they can plow snow out of this parking lot. That's one of the reasons we placed it at this intersection, and obviously as they're coming up and around the hill. And then we also have, this is a large tree, but there's room for snow storage beneath the base of it, and then also along the edge of this parking drive, kind of 2 areas of the whole edge of it could be serve as snow storage for that drive. Incidentally, this is a fire access drive. We met with the fire department and have provided improved access on this side of the building, and then provided this fire lane for access to the new addition.
So you're gonna do 22 parking spaces, right? How many staff are there and how many residents still drive and would be parking cars?
We have 2 residents right now who have cars, and they don't necessarily use them regularly, but they're there, they're parked there. We have a total between full-time and part-time of about 15 or maybe 16 staff. The most staff that are on site at any one time, including contracted staff for the kitchen, would be 9.
And in our application, we allowed for 2 additional staff possibly, so our application identifies 11 staff.
And that's not going to change after the addition?
The change from 9 to 11 is the change that we expect because we will be hiring more staff.
Right, but apart from that, there's no other contract or anything like that that you'll need when you have the addition?
No.
So do you really need 22 parking spaces?
Today, we had Holton Home residents come over and join us for a tea party. Visitors do come visit our residents frequently. We have events on occasion for, a staff holiday party, a family and friends of the residents party. So we feel like we do need more parking. We don't want people parking on the road, except for in extreme cases like when the governor comes.
It's an increase of 3 parking spaces, but there's this kind of unknown, unmarked area that's currently paved that one could argue is actually existing parking. That's kind of up in the air. We also looked at ITE standards, and this seems to be about the right number of parking spaces according to some of the references we have.
Are you going to talk more about the lighting? Where the lighting will be positioned, whether it will be turned off at night, if so, what time, that sort of thing?
Sure. I can point to where the site lighting is going to be. Provided this parking lot is redeveloped, there would be site lights added along the parking area. There's 2 lights proposed along this parking area. There is Then there is some lower lighting. So, I'm sorry, these site lights, I believe, would be, I think we have them spec to not be higher than 14 feet. I'll double check that. I'm gonna have to dig for that for you. But then we have lower level lighting for pedestrian circulation. We haven't talked with the applicant yet about timers for that lighting to go off. My only
Actually,
question
we
would be
did.
about shift change. We did?
John and I met
Okay,
with the
great.
electrical engineer last week, and
Mhm.
we want our staff to focus on the residents, so we did ask for timers for things that ought to go off and on.
And I think that all of the parking lighting will be on a timer to go off at 9:30 or 10 o'clock at night and then come back on following dusk.
Probably a few minutes after 10, because
Yeah.
10 o'clock is shift
Shift change.
change.
So 10:30?
Yes, certainly by then.
And this is every light, I assume you have a couple of lights on the doors that don't go off, or is it every outdoor light?
We were just talking about the parking lot lighting, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I think that every light can go off. What we're showing on E1, the foot candles on the sidewalks that the electrical engineer has laid out are minimum foot candles to safely navigate. So this is, I think there's a chart on here. It's on E2. You know, I think some of these sidewalks show 0.1 foot candles, and that's equivalent to moonlight. And that would be the lowest that those lights are on.
Well, you gave us some lighting specs.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, if people, say, go to a concert or something, and they come back later than 10:30, then the lights will be out, right?
Does that happen?
Yes. Normally, people are taken by a family member or friend, and then they're dropped off. So I think we'd want to have the door lights on.
I think that the lights won't go off completely, especially the ones at the entries. They'll be dimmed significantly, and the controllers and the fixtures will be able to turn those lights down.
We talked about having a switch at the nurse's station for an ambulance in the middle of the night to make sure that lights were back up if something like that happens. But not the parking areas, just the entry areas.
Yeah, if you do the portico thing, you can have lighting that can
Right.
dim and then come back up
Yes.
under there, right?
Yes.
You currently have a curb and sidewalk, or is the curb and sidewalk you're talking about doing, is that all new?
We do not have a curb and sidewalk, no.
It's all
I
just
didn't think
pavement.
so, yeah.
It's all just pavement.
So it just seems to me that although you want to keep that as an option, I would think that that would be an important thing to have for the safety and people feeling secure walking around the front of the building, what have you.
I'm torn. I confess I hadn't noticed the sidewalks before, and I'm a little concerned about a trip hazard. At Holton Home, we designate a walking area on the asphalt at the same level as the rest of the driveway with a yellow painted line.
Oh, yeah.
And so we can talk about
Yeah.
that.
You mean you think sidewalks are more dangerous because of the joints?
Because of the curb, stepping up, stepping
Oh.
down.
Is it possible to make the sidewalk flush?
Yes. Although our standard detail has the sidewalk 1 inch above the asphalt, so that 10 years from now, if you do an overlay on that asphalt, you don't end up with the road higher than the sidewalk. George, the mounting height of the lights is going to be 15 feet.
15 feet.
Other questions from members of the board? Okay, there's a lot of members of the public here tonight. If you could approach that microphone, say who you are and where you live. Whoever wants to go first, go right ahead. If you were not sworn in, please just tell me and I will swear you in.
I guess I'll start. My name's Fletcher Proctor. I'm an attorney. I'm representing Lori Chipperfield and Martha Tompkins, who are the adjoining landowners, the abutting landowners to the north. I have to say that to start out with, I have, I guess, a procedural question, perhaps a substantive question. I have no idea what an institutional PUD is. Apparently, that's some status that was developed when this was owned by the Baptists. This building was owned by the Baptists, but it has no definition in either law or regulation that I can find. The town regulations dealing with PUDs are completely inapplicable to this project. And the significance of that is that it leaves it really unclear what the legal standard of review of this application is. So I'll put that out there to start with. Getting to the construction project itself, which I'm looking at in two phases. What's the impact of the construction, and then what's the impact of the ultimate building on the neighbors. And I would mildly dispute the characterization of my client's residence as being a great distance away to the north. To them, this property, this structure, and this proposed addition will loom large. Starting with the construction process, I guess the site prep sheet attached to the application indicates on it that no construction vehicle access will come across the northern driveway, and we would just like to be clear that that's neither in nor out of any vehicles. I can tell you that there is an easement. That driveway goes across my client's property, just at the very foot of it, but if you go look at it, it's essentially at the bottom of that driveway, it's essentially a shared driveway. So you're talking about direct interference of traffic with one another between the two property owners. So they would request that that be clear in any decision of this board. Similarly, during construction.
This is the north drive that goes off to the corner there?
Yes.
Left corner? Okay. I'm just making sure I'm following you.
Sort of fades off in your
Right.
drawing, but there's actually the driveway going into the Tompkins property. The property to the north here is actually overlaps right here.
Sort of the one behind, that we have an exhibit right here, if you'd like to point that out for reference.
This is oriented the other way,
That's right.
but that's a pretty good representation. Well, and I'll get to the driveway part more on the permanent aspect. The application also indicates that the applicant expects to exceed town noise ordinance standards at times during the construction, which is somewhat inevitable with a project like this. But because of that, we also ask that this board put some time limits on construction. Specifically, we request that construction be limited to 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. so that we don't have banging going on into the night. The application also, drawing C2, the site prep sheet, also shows a silt fence.
Hold on 1 second.
The fence shown on the drawing doesn't go all the way across the boundary between my client's property and this project. And we're concerned about that because particularly at the east side, one of the problems for us in interpreting this application is that the contour lines on those sheets you're looking at, they all fade out when they get to the northern boundary of the property. And what happens to the lay of the land in there is it gets pretty steep. So whatever comes off of that project comes down that hill. And it's already a situation where my client's property, their home, suffers flooding in the basement from runoff during the springtime as it is. They're very concerned about containing the silt and question why that, at least as represented on the drawing, why that silt fence doesn't go across the entire boundary. My client's home is set back a little on their lot. So the Chipperfield Tompkins home is actually pretty much opposite the gap you see in that silt fence. So we would ask that that silt fence be continued across. Getting to the overlap between construction and permanent, but more to the permanent end of it. We're very concerned about that access road. If I could go to the picture again, because it's a pretty good one. If you're looking at the angle between Harris Avenue and the north driveway, that's a pretty shallow angle to begin with. But it's also, Harris Avenue is making a curve. So when you come off of Harris Avenue, when you come off of Putney Road and look up Harris Avenue, you're literally looking straight up at Bradley House. It almost seems as if Harris Avenue curves and the driveway is the straight through. The significance of that is that it presents a problem for interference between traffic in and out of that site and every pedestrian, bicycle, and vehicle traffic. If you're coming off of Putney Road, you're in the right lane. When you go shoot up that driveway to Bradley House, you're crossing a lane of traffic to do it. And the tendency is to do what I just described, to shoot right up there. The town regulations, section 311C5, explicitly says that the angle of the driveway approach must be as close to 90 degrees as possible. This is, even if you allow for that curve in there, you're certainly no more than 30 degrees. And if you take the curve into account, it's almost a straight shot. This is really bad planning as far as we can tell. We'd rather see people have to actually consider the turn before they make it. We really do believe that's a safety issue in the neighborhood, and we're kind of surprised that it hasn't been addressed at any point in this process, since the town regulation is extremely explicit about it. We would request that the town honor its own regulation and impose a condition of getting as close to 90 degrees on those access roads as possible to keep them from being things that people zip in and out of. The runoff issue, I've already addressed a bit. I haven't had the benefit of whatever, I did go through the file on this morning. I didn't see any indication of whatever changes are being talked about along that north boundary. It's hard to assess how well that rain garden will actually contain runoff, because again, the contour lines sort of fade out on that side of the plans. Similarly, the screening along there, apparently there's been some discussion of changing what vegetation is put in. The proposed construction is going to create sort of an L-shaped area on the north side of the building, which appears to be, I think it was referenced here tonight, as a delivery area. The regulations on the screening of that, of delivery areas, service areas, are pretty clear, that they should be pretty well screened off. My clients would very much appreciate having them screened off. And it's not,
I apologize for interrupting you. Are you referring to what they also described as the fire access? The road that goes off
yes,
in that
yeah,
direction?
I think
Okay.
the fire access part of it sort of continues beyond what would be a delivery area. And that fire access that you see is sort of hatched areas along each side of the roadway, which are, as I understand it, to provide support for a fire engine that sticks out those arms to the side when it's extending a ladder or whatever.
Is your request that the entire length of it be screened?
At least insofar, well, I get to another aspect of screening, but certainly as to the extent that it functions as a delivery area, yes. And at this point, it's not clear to us that the proposed plantings are sufficient to actually screen the sight line from my client's house. As I say, it's hard to tell without the contours, but what we would request is that the screening, as installed, be at least 6 feet tall. The plantings be at least 6 feet tall, and with a mature height of at least 12 feet, in the hopes that we can block that off.
When you're referring to the plantings, do you refer to the northern line that is somewhat parallel to the lane and in the direction of your client's property?
Yes.
Okay.
Although, as I say, it's hard for me to tell where on the slope that would be best located.
Right.
But the other part of the screening, it's been somewhat addressed in terms of headlights shining toward the west and the proposal now to put arborvitae along that parking lot. This project won't just result in light from fixtures that are exterior to the building. There's going to be light coming from within the building. We're also concerned about the impact of that, which is going to be less regulated, I think. Those lights aren't going to go off on a timer. So we do ask that this board consider putting some requirement in the permit that there be shades and some guidelines as to when either lights are out or the shades are drawn at night so that lights aren't shining into the neighbor's house.
Can I just ask the applicant, do the cut sheets account for that, or are those just outdoor lighting?
It's just exterior lighting.
Sorry.
I think that pretty much covers my issues for right now. Thank you.
Sure. My suggestion is that, Brian, you explain the sort of tortured history with this particular PUD, given that our record is not as strong as it generally is, just for the benefit of the applicant and their counsel.
Sure. So IPUD was a category under our old zoning code. It is a planned unit development that is granted to an institution. It is no different from any other planned unit development except in that ownership. The zoning code recognizes the vested rights in approved subdivisions and PUDs, and it allows PUDs to be modified as a major, or no, as a minor subdivision, which is what the board is considering.
Well, as I say, all of the regulations dealing with PUDs don't seem to contemplate this sort of project, so it's really hard to figure out
They
what
might
the
have.
legal standard is.
They might have at one time, but it's a consequence of PUDs being eternal, and our regulations now, I think, trying to fix many of the problems of the past, but many of the PUDs of the past being grandfathered in. Is that fair characterization?
The town can't extinguish them, so
Yeah. Some of them would like to, but that's neither here nor there. I'd like to try to go through, and I'll take more public comment after this, but because Attorney Proctor raised so many different issues, I kind of want to try to go through them with you folks before we get to the next comments. The first question I think we should address is the last one, and we'll go backwards. Is there a way to determine the effect of the lights or the light pollution, if you will, from interior lighting, particularly on that north side?
Well,
Or is there a way to mitigate it?
I think that there's a way to think about it, and that is that any lights that come from the interior of the resident room, say for example on the west facade, the west elevation of the new construction, those will be essentially downcast, shielded lights by virtue of the walls around them, and that the tops of the windows are lower than the ceiling. I can say that we're planning on doing ceiling-mounted fixtures there. Any light that does spill onto the lawn will be in my opinion, very short in distance from the building.
Do you know yet what type of fixtures would be inside the building, or is that a premature question to ask?
We don't know yet.
Is there some kind of standard for rooms of this type, sort of dormitory style living, for the type of, the brightness of the lighting you use?
Not that I know of. We had our first meeting with our electrical engineer to start discussing those things.
Okay.
I think, Cindy, if you would agree that the front of the mansion on the first floor will remain unchanged.
That's right.
And the living room, and there is a resident room in the bottom southwest corner of the building. I would not expect that there'd be any light change from the inside of that building on all 3 floors. And then no change towards the south end where the annex is. Certainly there will be lighting in that porte cochere, but as we've spoken earlier, that will be dimmed and it will only come on at night in the case of an emergency.
Okay. And the windows that are in the addition are slightly smaller than the windows in the mansion from the north, is that right?
That sounds correct, yes. They're very large windows in the mansion.
Right. I don't know if you know this, but do you know if the light pollution is presently a problem from the mansion as it views northward?
Well, I think my clients live with the situation that exists, but
Mm-hmm.
it's the expansion of use that has them concerned.
Sure. Brian, do we have authority to regulate interior lighting?
I don't think so.
I can tell you that at Holton Home, we have blinds on all the windows in resident rooms. I can't promise blinds in the mansion that pre-existing those enormous windows, but in the addition, that is our intention.
Okay. Well, it occurs to me it's a creative issue that we've never, I think, addressed, but I don't think we can actually regulate the interior lighting. I think we can only do the exterior.
Yes, and we certainly can't tell residents that they must lower their blinds.
Yeah.
It's their room. For privacy, most do.
Let's talk a little bit about the driveway issue.
Okay, if we were gonna go backwards, we can talk about trying to plant the screening
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah.
to maximize the screening of the entire building, which would hopefully help with the lighting also from the inside of the building as well as the outside of the building. And
Okay.
we are more than happy to look at that in more detail with the neighbors and place this row of screening in an ideal location. We don't want it to come closer to the building because we have this loop here.
Right.
But we actually had a staff meeting last week and we talked about perhaps a row of arborvitae's getting closer to the property line, having more effect, and we're happy to look at that.
Is there something about the suggestion by the abutter of 8 feet to 16 feet that would be infeasible?
I wrote down 6 to 12. Mature height, no. Planted height,
Oh,
yes.
Pardon me.
I believe that planting, I'm gonna use arborvitaes, they're an easy example, they're the very dense growing, fast growing ones that get quite high if you choose the right species. But to plant a 6-foot high arborvitae would be an enormous cost to achieve that screening.
Are there other alternative plantings that would meet the height classifications that are not as burdensome?
I don't know the answer to that. I know that we use arborvitaes almost exclusively in a situation like this because they're fast growing. So if the intent is to achieve a 12-foot height, I think arborvitae is the right choice. But I think we need to talk about something that's smaller to start with and understand that it's going to take a year or two longer than possibly from 6 to 12 feet.
So if you were planting them, how tall would they be?
Let me take a look because we have some proposed arborvitaes and I can see.
And how fast would they grow roughly? I understand there are variables.
You have Tom on
here,
speed dial? We didn't bring our landscape architect
No, that's
with us
okay.
tonight, so. Why don't we keep going with the other questions and I'll try and
but- Okay.
find that in our notes.
Am I correct that the next thing was the driveway?
Great.
Or maybe, well, we can talk about the driveway, we can talk about the delivery screen, right? I sort of put them next to each other. Whichever you'd rather deal with first.
Okay, so I think we actually have adequate delivery screening.
Can you show where the deliveries would occur? I'm not completely clear on that.
I think they're gonna come in possibly 3 places, but they're primarily here, right, John?
That's correct. And
Yeah,
the
kitchen-
food deliveries are going to be the primary delivery, and that truck will back right to this location
Okay?
and access personnel in a hand truck into this entry right here.
So if we're talking about a truck that's parked here, between the overplanted rain garden and the row of screening behind it, I think we have done a very good job of screening a delivery truck from a home that's essentially right here.
How tall would those screenings be at their highest?
These are the same bushes that we're talking about having be at
Okay.
least a 12-foot finished mature height growth.
Okay.
And so back to those arborvitaes, and while I would like to talk about something smaller at a planted height, we can definitely choose a species that would have a 12-foot mature height.
Okay. How long would it take to mature, do you know?
I can possibly look into that during the meeting if need be.
Okay. How about the angle of the driveway and the method of ingress and egress?
So a few things to talk about on that item. First of all, we're not asking for any changes to access. So that's not, we didn't see that as part of our application. I mentioned that earlier. I think it would be quite challenging to change the orientation of this access to Harris Avenue because it is such a drastic grade change. So I believe the reason it's running out like this is so that it can come to a flat spot and then cars can proceed. And if we were, the logical thing to do to make it a 90-degree would be to wrap it in tighter right here, but then you'd be coming off that relatively steep bank that much more. That may create an unsafe condition for cars coming down into Harris Avenue, particularly in the winter. So that seems like a difficult thing to do.
Might it be possible to put something there like a speed bump?
Yes, I think that, I mean, from an engineering standpoint, I don't see that being a problem. There's possibly a sign that could be added, although
We've ordered signs that coming up the driveways say caution elders walking, and going down the driveways say yield to pedestrians and traffic.
Okay. And those are visible from the north as you come in from that entrance that we've been talking about?
There will be signs on both sides of both driveways, both sides.
Okay. Are you sure you have the right to put them there?
They will be along our driveway. They won't be on the road.
Okay.
So generally speaking, Cindy, they're kind of in this vicinity.
Yes.
Not down at the intersection.
That's right, and then on the south driveway as well.
Can you talk a little more about the efficacy of the rain garden?
Yes. So.
And this, why don't we throw the silt fence in because it all relates to
Sure. The silt fence is in a location chosen basically because of where we see potential sediment flowing during construction. Happy to have silt fence just go across the entire northerly line of the project. It also, sometimes we put silt fence all the way around a construction site just to define where people can work. So that's a relatively easy fix. Happy to do that. Regarding the rain garden, it will collect water from the south of it. So in essence, we're not changing the grading or the drainage patterns from this walkway north. Okay, we're adding some landscaping, but and redoing this path. But the rain garden's purpose will be to collect water from this area here, and then also from the roof of the new addition. So previously, all of this water was running overground. At least that's our understanding of the existing topography. And so by collecting this area here in the rain garden, that's an improvement of what's currently in place, and then we'll also collect all of the roof water.
Did I see somewhere in here that the rain guard is designed to deal with up to an inch
That's
of
correct.
rain?
Yeah, yeah. At the state level, that's called the water quality volume. In the town regs, that's the depth of rainstorm that you're asked to design to.
In what time period does the inch come down?
It's typically a 24-hour storm, so 1
Okay.
inch in 24 hours.
Okay. And
It also typically happens in a much shorter time span.
right,
Yeah,
right.
but that volume will handle that if it's 6 inches or 24 hours, 6 hours or 24 hours.
And I asked you a little bit about the grading change with respect to the rain garden. Is it going to actually tip back into the rain garden, i.e., will some of water that used to flow north flow south now?
No.
For a couple feet? No.
No.
So-
Well, no, just at the very perimeter of the rain garden. So
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
I was
So,
thinking of the connecting path. It seems like
the water from here is going to flow over the path.
Okay.
At some point, it just becomes infeasible because you end up with this really awkward bowl that wouldn't fit into the landscape. And so
Okay.
this being regraded, actually with a little bit of fill here, but by this being regraded, we can direct water into the rain garden.
Okay. The abutter raised the issue of the time of construction.
Yes, 2 items on that. So it is planned to not have construction vehicles drive out of the north access, primarily to save that pavement, but it sounds like it has a secondary benefit here. I'm concerned about the construction hours. In this industry, often construction starts at 7 a.m. and I know that that's an impact on neighbors. But I'd be concerned about the people willing to work on the project, the cost of the project going up by constraining those hours. And I think 5 o'clock is probably a reasonable quitting time, but typically contractors get started at 7 in the morning.
Okay.
Especially in the winter. By 5 o'clock, it's dark.
And we're going to be doing winter
I
construction.
have a question about your, the parking. You had said you have 15 people at work there. That covered that. Is that the 15 people there all day long, or is that alternated between shifts?
That's our total payroll, so some of them work the night shift, some are there on weekends, et cetera.
You said 9 max and 11
Yeah,
after
right
this,
now,
right?
and then
Yeah,
it'll go up to
okay.
11. Mhm.
I just wonder if we could hear, I generally don't call people twice in a row, but because they are going through your complaints, first of all, did I miss anything? No? Do you want to follow up regarding any of the responses by the applicant?
I would just say, if you look at C2, look at the contour lines on that. It occurs to me that if you take this driveway and bring it up a little and put a dog leg in it, you're not talking, you can reroute this driveway there without having it go down a steep slope. This really is a hazardous intersection here, and beyond that, I don't see a lot of wiggle room in your regulations. They're pretty clear about wanting to have 90-degree intersections for precisely the reason that's concerning the neighbors. I mean, it's one thing to say you're gonna put signs on this and slow people coming out. What about the people coming off of Putney Road who see that as a straight visual line? I've driven that road. It's real easy to zip right up there without even hesitating. And the point of 90-degree intersections is to force a hesitation, because not hesitating is how people get hurt.
Did I misunderstand? Are the signs for those coming out or those coming in?
Both.
Okay.
We plan on having two face signs on each driveway about a third of the way up, asking them to slow down because our residents are walking around the property. And then when they're exiting, we want them to be conscious of pedestrians. There are many in that neighborhood, and also oncoming traffic.
Okay. I don't want to completely monopolize this, and I know many people came tonight. Could I have other comments or other things that people might want to put on the record?
I'm Jeannie Crosby. I live across the street. I'm a western abutter. And I did want to start by saying I think your new regulations are great. I am now intimately aware of them.
And we don't write them, so.
Well, like somehow you made sure they had. And Brian Benham was also very, very helpful. And I want to thank him for being able to look at the pieces of the application and tell what they really said. We do have several concerns. They do, not surprisingly, in many ways mirror the concerns of my two sisters, who both, because of medical issues, are out of state and not able to be here. So that Fletcher spoke for them. But the issue of traffic every day, but specifically during construction, I know that what's in the site plans is what is permitted unless there's a change. But I would really specifically like to see a condition on the permit of no construction traffic on the north part, even though I assume that's what's intended. I want to make sure that that's what happens. Because we live there all the time, we really would like to see the regulation about the angle of the drive worked on. And I can't tell you how many times I've come out of the Chipperfield Tompkins Drive and almost been hit by someone coming out of Bradley who never looked and came across the Chipperfield Tompkins property and almost smashed into someone coming out of that drive, or sitting waiting to come out of that drive because of understanding how dangerous it is. It's not a wonderful thing for us. A dog leg would bring lights into our living room, our bedroom, but I'd rather that than the danger that we see all the time. And I am concerned, even though I'm up at 5 o'clock, I'm concerned about the noise. And I would like to see construction limited to Monday through Friday. If it starts at 7 and ends at 4, okay? But there need to be constraints on that, because this is not an institutional district. It's a residential neighborhood district, and you're very clear in the regulations about what you think that means. The other issue that I wanted to speak about is this lighting issue. And the point is that if someone built a house next to me, it might have 4 lights on a particular end of the house that would be there. In counting the windows on the new addition, what looks to the west is double the number of residential rooms. What looks to the north is also double the number of residential windows. And so this is a large amount of light. It really will look like a cruise ship at dock. And partly because we're looking up, both from my house from the west and from the Chipperfield Tompkins house from the north. You're looking up. It's not like looking across a valley and seeing that down there. It's right there. So I do understand that you don't regulate internal light. Well,
It's not that we don't as a matter of practice. I'm not sure we have the jurisdiction to,
Well, that's what, it's not in the regulations.
right?
But as you're discussing the quality of life of the neighborhood and the quality of the natural environment, which I understand you've been very articulate about as the underlying foundation for most of the regulations, I would hope that folks would take that into account, and whether that's not a condition of a permit, but a comment, or whatever you wish to call it, that be at least thought about.
Ms. Crosby raised the question of Monday through Friday. Is the plan to work on Saturdays, or is that consistent with what you had planned?
The plan's never to work on Saturdays, but a lot of projects that we have get behind the schedule, or we have a hard winter and we have to catch up in the spring, and inevitably most of the projects that I work on, there's a request to work on Saturdays. I don't know how the applicant feels. I'd be very concerned about eliminating Saturdays altogether.
Yeah, timing is pretty important. I'll just say that the greatest number of admissions to a home like Bradley House or Holton Home tend to be in the fall. Elders want to move before the snow flies. They've had one last summer with their garden, and we're really hoping to be ready by the end of 2017 so we can help people who need it then. It's important to us to make sure that we're not disturbing our residents all hours of the day and all days of the week. What we've done at Holton Home is ask them to take their lunch break at the same time that the residents take their lunch break. So there can be peace and quiet while they're eating and digesting and socializing. But otherwise, we certainly don't allow them to start before 7 in the morning, but 7 o'clock to 5 o'clock feels pretty reasonable, and it allows for subs who work at slightly different hours than other folks might work who are on the project to be there.
I did have one other question.
Go ahead.
On this landscape piece, the rain garden, as you see, does not go very far to the east.
Yeah.
And where the addition is proposed, how wide is the addition?
It's 42 feet,
42 feet? Which way?
top to bottom of the page.
Okay,
East to west.
so east to west is
Yep.
40 feet. So on that 40 feet is where the biggest runoff has normally come?
I think they said they're gonna put it in a pipe with the gutter. Is that right? It's gonna be
Pipe.
piped off that roof into the rain garden?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, and what I'm talking is just what naturally runs downhill, not necessarily coming off the roof.
Oh,
think
I
that's
see.
great. But because that hill is so steep, and the water has always come down there, and so I don't really see any change
Go on.
in the water flow from between the rain garden and the tree line. Whatever that looks from here, like 60 or 70 feet.
So, we're talking about this area here.
Yes,
There-
especially the 40 feet right in there.
There will be a slight change. If the underlying topo actually shows a very slight swale along the edge of the tree line, which may be actually sending water towards that property. And we're going to round off those contours so that one might there is a portion right before the tree line where instead of the water coming this way, the water will now be directed into the woods. So that's a slight change, but I think more to your question, we're not proposing to change the drainage pattern to the north of the rain garden. That existing water is going to flow in a similar pattern as it currently does.
Well, thank you. That's what it looked like.
Yep.
And I know that Holton Home has said things will be better.
Well,
And I just don't see a change, so.
Okay, well, I've walked through that. I think the overall drainage will improve because a portion of water that was immediately north of the existing building will be going into that rain garden.
And this whole area, all the rain that fell there,
Are there other members of the public who wish to speak?
yeah.
I, Chris Frost, live directly across Harris Avenue to the west from the main entrance to the Holton Home. We do have a couple of, first of all, we do support the project. We think this is great, actually, but a couple of concerns. Nothing has been mentioned about the runoff to the south driveway, storm runoff, which has already been a problem at times.
This is runoff that comes down from the
It
south
comes down
driveway and across the road to you.
There's a storm drain there that it tends to miss in the road and then runs across the road and actually causes erosion on our neighbor's property. The road actually on the west side of Harris Avenue has actually been undercut where the rainwater runs off, drops off the edge of the pavement. And that has been an issue. And what we're wondering about with, I know you're saying there's a net overall loss of the permeable surface, but how is the grade change going to affect that? Because you are changing the grade slightly, and some of those areas that are now gravel that will be paved may contribute more to that problem that's there. The other thing is during construction, we're worried about water heading down the steep hill straight towards our house. Which
This is the west, just the general
the west-
western
the
envelope.
west side, that whole western bank.
Yeah.
Especially, I don't know if the project's going on during the winter or not, the ground will be frozen. Whereas that lawn area will soak up a lot of water during the summer. It's actually amazing it does with that steep bank. Once the ground freezes, it really doesn't do anything. And you can see on the aerial photo, one of the things that we wonder about, our house actually sits lower than Harris Avenue.
Can you put the aerial photo on? That's all right. You can stay by the microphone. Well, you can come up if you want to, but
This is our house right here. And so you've got this bank coming down, there's a corner in the road right through here. And water coming down and sheeting across that in the winter would be an issue, like, that we end up with a car down in even our driveway, you can't tell from this picture, but it's steep. Like, once you pitch down that, you're headed right into our house.
and there's no ditch there, right?
There's no ditch.
Yeah.
No, actually, if you're driving down Harris Avenue, we've often wondered if we're not gonna have a car someday lose it on the corner and just end up in our house as it is.
Yeah, right.
That's kind of the same thing that he was talking about, cars going straight up the driveway, we kind of worry about them coming straight down into our house.
Do you have any opinion as to whether what the applicant proposed with changing the trees out so that there's no planting on that slope would improve that?
Our only issue, my wife and I talked about, was the way it's currently configured. We get a lot of headlights right into the house.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the grade difference, the headlights actually go higher than the second floor on the house.
Right.
But when people pull in with their low beams on, which would be normal, they're actually heading downhill and right into
Mhm.
all the windows on the front line. So
Yeah.
the arborvitay that he was talking about, from our point of view, would actually block those lights nicely.
Okay, so that's preferable to you.
She had mentioned that, I believe you mentioned it, it's a nice looking house. It's a nice looking house on the hill. We actually don't mind the view of the house on the hill.
Right.
So in terms of trees to block it, that really wouldn't do anything for us.
Okay.
We do have another issue with construction traffic. Ours is actually on the south entrance, and that picture won't really show it. Once you leave out the south entrance, which we're trying, the project is saying basically all construction traffic has to go in the south. The intersection of Wantasket Drive and Harris Avenue, and then again where Harris Avenue and North Street meet, both of those intersections are problems. It's kind of a no man's land at Harris Avenue and Wantasket. The people coming up Wantasket think they have the right of way, people on Harris think they have the right of way.
It's a terrible
We've had-
intersection.
Yeah, we've had several
Yeah.
close calls there ourselves, and we know to watch for it. And then the other one is the stone pillars where Harris Avenue turns into North Street. And there's really nothing that says who's going first through those, but only one's going through at a time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so when you send all the traffic south, you're putting people through two bad intersections before they get out to Putney Road. So I'm not sure what the answer to that is, because I understand what their problem is with the north. I don't know if that driveway would be reconfigured a little bit on that, with that dog leg they're discussing. I don't know if that would be a better option to actually send traffic out the north than to send traffic out the south. But that was one of our immediate thoughts with added construction in that neighborhood. Another thing with the added construction is it doesn't matter where you go on Harris Avenue, there are no sidewalks. And actually, many of the people that walk by our house are actually residents of Holton. But we also get a fair number of people throughout the day that just want to go for a walk, lunch and whatever.
Mhm.
So we didn't know what you may be able to impose. I know they can make requests to contractors, but
Yeah.
always do anything about, time of day, traffic in, out, any restrictions that can be made, speed limits made. I don't know if any requests can be made to the town to make the marking in that intersection down Harrison has to get better.
So as soon as you leave that property, it's a matter for the Traffic Safety Committee. If you're talking about circulation on the property or the way that the property's drives interact with the streets, that's us. It often frustrates us too, because we've had a number of applications that are right next to problem intersections recently, and it's a challenging thing to deal with.
Traffic was a real concern when we had our first big neighborhood meeting at the church. And we were able to get Hannah O'Connell and I think Steve Barrett came, and we sent some letters to the Traffic Safety Committee. They are talking about turning the Wantasket Drive and Harris Ave intersection into a stop sign instead, and that would be a little safer.
Yeah.
I'm a little concerned about larger, a construction delivery truck that's delivering a big load of lumber. There's no way they can go out the south driveway and, as you're saying, and Chris, safely navigate through the stone pillars, and it's crazy. It makes more sense to go north on Harris Avenue and out to Putney Road.
It does.
But there's no way a big vehicle can exit the south driveway and do a really sharp turn.
They can't exit the north driveway into a south turn. They would have to go to Putney Road. And
Yeah, that's
and
where
that intersection's hard too. I've driven bigger vehicles, and the best thing to do is go on to Putney Road. If you're intending to go south, go north, and find a place to turn around and come
yeah,
back.
yeah,
The rotary?
But you can't force people to do that either.
yeah.
Right.
I will say that we're in the process of developing a pre-qualification letter to send to contractors because it's really important to us that we're working with somebody, we've started calling it, who plays well with others, who is really going to respect and enforce with all the subs what our expectations are. I've had no problem doing that with all the many big projects we've done at Holton Home. It's a very different neighborhood. The standards here must be higher. I won't have any trouble insisting on that as well, and we expect to have a contractor who will work with us very closely on that.
Thank you. Oh, sorry.
I would just say to reiterate, our number one concern is storm runoff, both during construction and afterwards, especially to that south side, which wasn't addressed.
I'll ask him to get into that right after you're done.
I was gonna ask about the second rain garden that you're gonna build, and whether that would help alleviate some of his issue.
That rain garden will collect some amount of water, but and some water that's flowing to the west, but not in the proximity of. Remind me, sir, is this your home here?
Yes, correct.
Okay, so that smaller rain garden is in this vicinity and will be picking up water from the roofs of the porte cochere and also this parking area. So as far as this, it'll help somewhat with the water that's flowing west.
Does that have the same capacity, the 1 inch?
It does, yeah. It's serving a smaller area, but
Right.
it
Now, is that
is.
still 1 inch per hour in the winter when the ground's frozen up? Or is
No,
that
not
just
in-
in the
not-
summer?
There is not a design that can be done for the 1 inch in the winter when the ground is frozen.
Right.
We will be putting silt fence along the west side as far as, helping with erosion and runoff. And that silt fence will be in place prior to the winter so that we don't have to try and put it in when the ground is frozen. Runoff in the winter is always a challenge, whether it's during construction or not.
We already have problems with water coming in our basement with that downhill slope just within our own driveway. That's one of the reasons why we expressed that concern. And even during heavy rains in summer, during Hurricane Irene, I was down in our basement, with shot back. Who knows how long.
Yeah. Right.
So it was the stormwater and then the construction traffic, I think, were our two issues.
Okay.
And other than that, we actually are in favor of the project. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there other members of the public that wish to comment?
Hello, I'm Sissy Lofton. I live at 139 Harris Avenue. So I don't live immediately abutting either way, but I do have vision of the Bradley house. And some of my concerns are the same that have already been mentioned. One is the quality of life. And the hours of the noise is something that I'm concerned about. And I assume that when they start digging and making the foundation, that there will be some heavy noise, that pounding, whatever, however they're going to do it, go through the rocks or whatever. And I don't look forward to that. And I do support, and Janet and I both support Bradley House and want the best for the residents. But we also want the best for us who live in the area. The traffic hazards are a real problem already. I don't know if you're aware that it's the area of Harris Avenue, Wintasket, is a suggested walking route that the town has given out. So those of us in the neighborhood who walk, there are also people who walk from different places in town who come to our neighborhood. So we have pedestrians, we have dog walkers, and we already have problems with big trucks coming down Harris Avenue and going up into. And we've talked with Cindy about that, and I think she's trying to correct that. I think the more of those truck drivers that we have, the harder it'll be to control that.
Do you have an opinion on the question of south versus north?
I think either one of them is problematic, or both are problematic. I liked your suggestion of a speed bump, maybe on both those things. And we'd even thought about having a speed bump request on the road itself, because people do speed. They take shortcuts through Harris to go down, I think, to the school, the Catholic school down there. So, and there are no sidewalks, as you know, it's already been said. So it is dangerous. And sometime coming in from Harris Avenue, the truck, that Harris Avenue in Putney is a very difficult turn if you're going north. You have to sort of swing out and come in. And sometimes the truck ends up on the wrong side all the way, or all the way back the other way. So, and I hate for the pillars to be knocked down. We are always very fond of those, and the historical nature of that.
We can't control it one way or another, so.
Right.
I like them too, but it's a town
That brings
decision.
me
not-
to another thing, is that I think a lot of this seems very uncertain in terms of the details. And I'm sort of surprised that they're, maybe we're at the beginning of the process, but that they're not more direct, really firm answers about the design and stuff. And I wonder who's going to be enforcing if
Mr. Bannon. And some of the conditions that we sometimes attach to permits, they require compliance to his satisfaction.
Okay. Well, I would appreciate knowing that would happen. I know that Cindy doesn't want to have problems, that she wants, I was appreciative when you said that you were going to vet the people who are doing that. And it is, you want to start out as friends with the contractors and end up friends. When we were at St. Michael's Episcopal, we prayed for the construction people. And I think we had a very little delayed but fairly happy relationship by the end of it. So I suggest that to all of us. And
We can't make that a condition, though.
I also was concerned about the runoff from the south. And I wondered why you were paving the parking lot when it does absorb more than if you paved it and it runs off. Or if you find some other kind of paving with, I don't know the title of it, but bricks and grass and
Pervious pavers.
Pervious.
Huh?
Pervious pavers.
Pervious, yeah. Or leave it the way it is. I think that, Jen, is there anything else that
Just the roadway by them, so I think it's dangerous.
yeah, the roadway is dangerous. And also the time that it might take. Now, I think it says 13 months.
That's right.
And that's another thing we can pray for. But again, who's going to look after us once we get into this process? And it sort of gets out of control. Thank you.
Brian, could you just address her questions about enforcement and what happens if they go beyond timelines so she hears it from you?
Sure. So if there is an issue with one of these conditions, you should contact me and I'll talk with Cindy. We've worked together on different projects where we've been able to address neighbors' concerns going through these large projects, and I think with some success.
What is your name?
It's Brian Bannon, and I can give you my card afterwards.
Okay, and your phone number?
It's 251-8111.
811. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
A good one to memorize. Could you address the south runoff question that, I'm sorry, was it Cotton? Miss Cotton?
Lofton,
Lofton.
L-O-F-T-I-N.
It's my bad handwriting, not you.
Two or three neighbors have brought this up now. So I think we're talking about drainage that's coming off of the south drive and actually missing this catch basin and going across the road and actually causing some troubles across the road. Kind of feel obligated when we talk about these drives that we're not requesting any changes to the drives tonight, but definitely want to work on the concerns.
I meant particularly with respect to the newly paved lot.
Sure. So this is an existing gravel lot. I want to say one quick thing about this though, because I've been thinking about this as I've been listening, and I think that we could just do some regrading on the edge of the driveway. We wouldn't have to do any additional paving, but I think we could do some regrading, and I believe that would fix a significant portion of the water that's running by the catch basin. We might have to replace the top section of that catch basin in order to lower it. You always want a little bowl around the catch basin, and so if the water's running by it, it's just not at the appropriate elevation to be catching this water. But it looks like the shoulder of the road right there might be proud and might be keeping the water in the driveway until it gets past the catch basin. So that's something we can definitely look at improving. This is in the town right of way, but I think the DPW would be open to looking at that.
Now, I understood that that lot drained east. Am I wrong about that?
This parking lot?
Yes.
This parking lot drains currently south and east, that's correct. And we're not proposing to change that drainage pattern at all. A lot of people think that gravel allows water to soak up. The state of Vermont, as far as impervious surfaces are concerned, and our engineering reference as we go through design, treat gravel and pavement as both impervious with the same amount of infiltration, which is insignificant. Not zero, but insignificant. So there shouldn't be a significant change to the runoff going from gravel to pavement. This is an area where we're redeveloping, and so we're not specifically catching this water. But it is going to maintain its existing drainage pattern. It shouldn't be getting out into this driveway and hence coming down the south drive.
I think it does.
You think that it currently does?
It does.
It does.
It definitely currently does.
Then hopefully we'll be improving that.
Yeah. You know, I just wanted to say I'm Barb Andrews, and I live right across the south driveway entrance on Tyler Street. It faces Tyler Street, backs up to Harris. And, you know, all the challenges are there now before this construction that are really impacting the drainage, the traffic. Yes, there's concern that some of this stuff, how will it make some of the problems worse? For the most part, I've heard most of it is going to eventually address in a positive way the things that have been problematic for the neighbors, such as the lighting and planting things that create more of a barrier. The biggest concerns I would have would be the drainage and the traffic, which seems like it really isn't the construction itself, but it's some of the side effects of that. And so if we can be, if there could be a lot of thought put into what are the traffic patterns for construction vehicles, and looking at the neighborhood in general, because it is a walking area, because it is a residential area, looking at whether it's the north or the south, but what is the safest with the least amount of negative impact on the neighborhood. And, I don't see that as a problem with the project as much as how can we be more thoughtful in how to make it as safe a project as possible. Because I don't know if any of you have been through the facility, but the changes are drastically needed, and the improvements are only going to help the area and the residencies around it. So that's it.
I've been thinking about something similar, if I can jump in. There could be a document that's created with the contractors once they're hired, working with the Traffic Safety Committee and DPW to come up with a traffic safety plan for the project.
That's a good idea.
I would hesitate to jump to any conclusions tonight because we may not be thinking about things that the Traffic Safety Committee or the DPW would bring up. And the contractor, for that matter, may have some good insight into the size of the vehicles and the best way for them to enter and exit safely. But I think working through a document like that would be a very appropriate thing to do.
Thank you. Are there further comments from members of the public? You go ahead. Just because you've gone already, let me just ask if there's anyone who has not had a chance who wishes to speak.
I just wanted to elaborate on something that Fletcher spoke about.
I only say this because we're on TV. Can you just say who you are one more
Jeannie
time?
Crosby, 102 Harris Avenue. The end of the drive, the north drive, goes across the Chipperfield Tompkins property. And there are utilities that go to that property that run under that space. And so damage from large construction vehicles is a real issue.
Do you know what kind of utilities?
Well, water, for one.
Do you want to respond to that?
Certainly. First of all, we can talk about traffic, and that can come into the traffic safety plan. We also have a note on our plans that go to the contractors that if they damage anything during construction that's not a part of the proposed project, that they're on the hook to fix those things. So if by chance there was any damage done to anything, it would be our responsibility and the contractor's responsibility to fix those things. I don't know what the depth of those utilities are. If they're 4 feet or more deep, then there shouldn't be any damage to them, but I understand the concern.
Any further comments from the members of the public? Yes.
Janet Brocklehurst, 139 Harris Avenue. I just want to reiterate the idea of speed bumps, because signs, we know that people often ignore signs, even if they're there, they don't necessarily do it. And whereas a speed bump, you do have to negotiate. And it could be arranged for, I don't know, for security, ambulances and things to get around it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's already, we've already said there's a problem of cars coming out quickly, but we have people from Bradley House walking very slowly, and it's a real concern for them. And a lot of us in the neighbourhood are older and walking along, and if those sort of trucks keep coming out really quickly, it's incredibly dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
A lot more than it is at the moment. And also, I'd like to just reiterate what Barb said about the road, the runoff from the south thing. The road on the other side is totally disintegrated, and I don't know whose responsibility that is when the water comes from Bradley House, but it's a city road, a town road.
Do you mean that the path of the water coming down that south drive has disintegrated the portion of the town road below it?
On the other side of it,
Okay.
it's broken off, and it's been like that for quite a while, which I don't think is safe. And I think it needs addressing now, but in the future it's probably going to be even more of a problem. And I think it's really important to plan so that that can be improved and not be made worse. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you want to talk any more about that? Or?
I think there's a conversation we had with DPW. On one or two other projects I've done, DPW has kind of come in and we're going to be doing some paving, and sometimes they piggyback on that and do some improvements to their own roads at the same time. So happy to have a conversation with them. I would hope that just some regrading around here will go a long ways towards getting more water into that catch basin. And our proposed grading certainly is that this parking lot is not going to drain down this south driveway.
Right.
It doesn't look that way to me when I'm out at the site, but if that's what it's doing now, we are going to change that slightly and send it into the woods.
Yeah, I was going to say, would it be too much to change that grade so that it goes completely east rather than split?
If you look at C4, it's proposed to be to flow kind of into this corner.
Okay.
So it'll flow to it's not directly east, but into the low spot there, to the far corner. I took some notes as I was listening. Would you like me to respond to some of the items, or do you want to ask questions?
No, I think probably it would be more effective if you just went through anything you want to comment on.
Okay. There was a question about impervious runoff versus the grading and raising grade in some locations. First, I want to clarify, we're not reducing the overall impervious at the site. That was not the intent of what I represented. regarding the Vermont Stormwater Manual, we are reducing existing imperviouses by 20% and/or treating 20% of those impervious surfaces to meet the stormwater treatment requirements for existing impervious surfaces. And then we are adding rain gardens and collecting and treating all of the new impervious surfaces. The grade changes will be unnoticeable, I would say, other than maybe the tweaking of that drainage pattern to the parking lot areas. We're not intending to significantly change those grades or that drainage. And then the fill that I mentioned to the north of the mansion, by raising that grade, that's actually going to improve the drainage because it's going to allow us to get more water into the rain garden. So that seems to be a trade-off by adding fill but actually collecting more storm water. I spoke to gravel and pavement being both considered impervious. There was a question raised or a concern raised about construction of the foundation. And just to share with everyone, it's sand and gravels out there. So there will be construction vehicles out there, but we don't anticipate hitting any ledge or having a difficult time digging the foundation hole.
So you won't be blasting?
Fingers crossed. We did not. We did a geotechnical investigation and did borings and did not hit ledge. Okay.
That's all?
That's all I have in my notes, yeah.
Thank you. Yes.
Neighbors Roger and Judy Miller at 31 Harris Avenue couldn't be here but gave me a letter to read. Is that permissible?
That's fine. We should probably know it. Was Roger on the DRB? No. Okay. Oh, he was on the Planning Commission. Go ahead.
Okay. We are writing to you to express our enthusiastic support for the proposed Bradley House expansion and renovation. As we understand the plans, this work will address some very serious safety issues and will improve both the safety and the comfort of the elderly residents. Narrow hallways will be widened and some areas will become more handicapped friendly. Certainly in today's world, and especially for the elderly, having a private bath instead of a shared bath is a necessity, and the proposed renovations will accomplish that. It seems to us that on the basis of safety of residents alone, the project should go forward as soon as possible. In addition, we know that nursing homes in general, Bradley House isn't a nursing home, and the Bradley House in specific have had a difficult time economically. By increasing capacity and by doing the renovations that will make the home more attractive to prospective tenants, the Bradley House will become better able to survive. To us, that vitality is very important because if the Bradley House does not succeed financially, our neighborhood would become a very different area. We have lived in our home at 31 Harris Avenue for 46 years. In terms of longevity, no one else except Corwin Elwell has lived in this neighborhood longer than us. Neighbors come and neighbors go, but one thing consistent about this neighborhood is that big, elegant building, which used to be called Hilltop Home and is now known as the Bradley House. That property has always been a prominent and positive piece of the fabric of our neighborhood, except for a number of years ago when it was a rooming house and the building and the grounds were allowed to fall into disrepair, creating an eyesore on Harris Avenue. In the world of commercial development, when you look at any big shopping mall, you will find what is known as an anchor store. If the anchor store is a Walmart, you have a pretty good idea of what satellite stores you will find in that mall. And if the anchor store is a Lord & Taylor, you will have a different idea of what that mall will offer you in terms of satellite stores. I submit to you that the Bradley House is the Lord & Taylor of our neighborhood. We want to see the Bradley House succeed because we want our neighborhood to remain the quiet, pleasant residential area that it is today. In March, we attended a meeting of the neighborhood, which was well attended by many neighbors as well as several representatives of the Bradley House. The meeting was held as an opportunity for neighbors to air their concerns about the proposed expansion and for the Bradley House representatives to listen and respond to those concerns. We were impressed with the willingness of the Bradley House representatives to hear everyone's concerns and were equally impressed with their responses. It is important to note that not a single neighborhood person spoke in opposition to the expansion of the building or against the renovations that were proposed. Nobody said that the Bradley House should not expand, and nobody said that the renovations should not proceed. Every concern that was expressed by the neighbors was connected to the construction phase of the project. I remember it a little bit differently, but I'll continue with
We
their
can't
letter.
really consider that anyway, so.
Okay. Some were worried about the noise, some were concerned about runoff of rain and melting snow, some were anxious about increased traffic on Harris Ave, others were concerned about how construction would affect the stability of the slope and trees on the east side of the property. The responses from the Bradley House representatives at the meeting was very positive. All concerns were heard, and assurances were given to those that those concerns would be addressed and that the contractors would be alerted to those concerns. We were assured that any impact on the neighborhood would be minimized to the best of their ability. In the 2 months since that neighborhood meeting, the Bradley House has kept its word. It has alerted the neighborhood to potential noise from test drilling. The town of Brattleboro Police have done traffic surveys at the urging of Bradley House, and we receive regular emails from the Bradley House concerning construction schedules. We personally are happy to put up with a small amount of inconvenience for a short period of time in order to achieve the end result, which we believe will be to create stability for the Bradley House as well as for the surrounding neighborhood for the long term. Thank you for your consideration, Roger and Judy Miller.
And let me just say, whatever happened at that meeting, if that's correct or not correct, we can't consider it. It's hearsay. It's not on the record here. We don't know who said what. So if that's not an accurate presentation of that meeting, we don't need to get into it.
I'm saying that there were additional concerns expressed
Even if
in
there
agreement
were,
with
even if there were
many of you.
prudent concerns expressed,
Okay.
it still doesn't matter. It's just what's said here. Anyway, are there further comments from the public? I think it might be appropriate for us. Is there anything else the applicant would like to say?
Technology is my friend. The landscape architect responded. 12 inches of growth per year.
Okay. And did you say they'd be 4 feet going in?
I did not say.
Do you know approximately how tall they'd be
On the
going in?
plans, they're identified as 2 to 3 foot arborvitaes.
Oh.
Okay.
So I think it might be appropriate, because there are so many issues raised, to have deliberative session rather than try to piece them all together.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? I expect that this is going to be roughly 15 to 20 minutes in deliberative session. I suggest you folks stretch your legs, but we will be back around 9:25 or 9:30. Okay, we're back on the record. It's 9:30. I appreciate the patience of the public that remains steadfast and the applicants. We discussed the various issues that were raised through public comment and the applicant's responses thereto, and the facts in the record and in the applicant's application. And the board is unanimous in concluding that approval of application 2016-99 is appropriate with the following conditions. A requirement that the north and the south drive have speed bumps and signage related to traffic on both ends, and that the applicant devise a safety plan with the contractors and the Department of Public Works to deal with the extraordinary traffic during construction. That construction be limited to 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Saturday, and that there be no construction allowed on Sunday. That runoff be mitigated by way of a silt fence completely enclosing the north boundary of the property and covering the west side as discussed in the hearing. That mitigation of runoff towards the south driveway, where there's presently an ineffective catch basin, be addressed by grading so that the maximum amount of runoff is redirected to the catch basin. And that the new parking lot be graded so that all of the runoff be directed in an easterly direction and away from the southward facing slope. With respect to screening, that there be a condition that a minimum 4-foot arborvitae along the north border or above the north border be planted and designed or be planted with a species such that it grows approximately 1 foot per year, to a 12-foot maximum. That along the west portion of the parking lot where there was testimony about headlights infiltrating properties across the street, there be arborvitae or bush-like screening which blocks that headlight pollution, and that it not be too tall, that it be a maximum of 5 feet tall to prevent blocking the building. Our understanding is that under the statute, we cannot waive the street tree requirement by ourselves. However, we can waive that requirement if the Department of Public Works agrees that the site at which street trees would be appropriate is not good for trees. So we're giving you what we feel is the broadest waiver we can to lose the street trees under the law, but it still requires your going to Public Works and getting something from them that agrees with your assessment that there's not an appropriate site for the trees. We also add a separate condition requiring specifically that any delivery areas, either planned or unplanned, be specifically screened from adjacent parcels. With respect to lighting, we have a request. We add a condition that the parking lights go off by 10:30 p.m. We considered the request related to interior lighting and reviewed the ordinances and conclude that whatever merit that proposal has, we simply don't have the jurisdiction to tell a property owner what they can and can't do with their interior lights. Those are the conditions, unless I'm forgetting any. Are you raising your hand, Brian?
No.
Okay. So moved?
So,
So moved.
Clarification?
Clarifications, yes. So with regards to the boulevard trees, is it, am I understanding correctly that you will give us a condition to waive those if we get DPW approval?
Yeah, the condition is going to read that we waive that provided you secure their approval.
Okay.
Brian can probably give you the site, and you'll see in the language of that ordinance why we phrased it that way.
Okay.
Ideally, it would be better to come here with the DPW approval, and then we could just give you the straight waiver. But we didn't want to create a situation where we'd have to come back later and thought that this
We don't
was
have that
appropriate.
flexibility under the PUD?
It's an overlay district, so unless it explicitly relieves you from landscaping, I don't see that you would.
And I guess boulevard trees are related to okay, fair enough.
We
That
don't-
sounds fair and appropriate.
We don't think you do, and it sounds to us as though the conditions of that steep slope would be an appropriate reason to argue to DPW that it's not normal street tree in the 5-foot barrier there, as the ordinance requires.
Appreciate that the safety plan is going to be a condition. Just want to clarify that on our submission, we had indicated no access out of the north drive during construction, and that will be kind of negated or overwritten by the opportunity to do this traffic safety plan.
We're specifically not making that a condition
Okay, great.
because there are problems on both ends, and we felt that a safety plan with Department of Public Works, who's frankly more qualified to deal with this stuff and might be able to address some of it, and the contractors would make more sense than us trying to predict things from behind a desk. And the things that the public raises have merit.
Agreed.
There's just no perfect solution that we can devise to deal with them. And we didn't want to try to do that because usually that doesn't work out very well because we're not experts.
The catch basin improvements at the bottom of the drive, I would ask that you include coordination with DPW or something, because that is work within their right of way.
We're happy to put it in the permit. We recognize that that's not your catch basin. The only condition is that whatever grading can be accomplished in order to maximize that catch basin from your property be done.
And the last is, I don't want to be in a situation where the screening from delivery areas is not what we're anticipating through our discussions tonight. I think we're talking about landscaping to the extent feasible to screen delivery areas. We don't want to end up with an 8-foot stockade fence that's around the entire parking lot or delivery area. So
I think I speak for us all when we were thinking about landscaping and specifically on the fire lane where the applicant indicated proposed food deliveries are to occur and where it seems like the north property would want to be screened from.
Yep, okay.
But if that were to change or if for some reason it was going back further and there was no screening, we would want there to be a requirement that there be screening.
Okay. Thank you.
Good. So moved.
Second.
Second.
You wanted me to reword that?
I'll get to you in 1 second. Any further discussion here? There's a request from the public to be heard. If you could just go to the microphone so you're on the record. I'm sorry to keep making you do that.
Sissy Lofton, 139 Harris Avenue. Who will be in charge of getting the speed bumps and the signs
They will.
before?
And if they don't, then you can talk to Mr. Bannon, and if they're violating their permit, there's a enforcement structure and a penalty structure, and
So before construction, we'd anticipate that to be done.
is there any reason why that can't happen?
Okay.
The signs will go up as soon as they're received, and we're expecting them shortly. And the speed bumps would be in by the time construction starts, I imagine.
Yeah, that's what I would hope.
Yes.
And that's what you're saying, you,
We don't customarily tell people when to do certain things in an application. Just if this is going to be your plan, this is the way it's got to end up. And we're very hesitant to get into how things are constructed because it's beyond really our expertise and our authority.
but it makes sense before the construction starts.
That said, we're very happy when we hear that everybody's on the same page, and it sounds like they are. And if you think that they're dragging their feet, then Mr. Bannon is certainly an appropriate person to go to, because if they're outside of their permit, then they must be by law, and he can enforce that with a number of tools.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you for reminding me about the speed bump. We were talking about actually offering the speed bump as a compromise, but in the winter they become damaged or just they're a huge maintenance pain. At Academy School that I'm familiar with, they remove the speed bumps in the winter, and we would ask that you consider that. We're confident that putting the speed bumps there for 6 months is going to change people's habits, and that they won't be needed long term, and they can be put back in if it becomes an issue again. But certainly during the winter, we'd like you to consider allowing us to remove them.
So these are detachable speed bumps?
That's right.
Is there a type of speed bump that can be removed by the person who's doing the snow removal? Like where you don't have to go 6 full months, but somebody...
Yes, but you'd probably spend an hour thawing the ground with some expensive equipment in order to remove them in the middle of an ice storm or a snowstorm. So it's generally something that is removed in the, at the first snow flies and so.
What do you think?
Do the best
Well,
they
it makes sense to do that. I mean, they can do a snowplow with speed bumps.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you to accept a friendly amendment to the motion.
Yes.
That speed bumps be detachable and removed for the shortest possible period of the year in the winter that's necessary to facilitate snow removal.
So move.
You just say you're okay with that.
I'm okay.
Okay.
We have another comment.
Yes.
Jeannie Crosby, just another question about your regulation about 90-degree entrances going down to perhaps 75 if necessary. Where do you see that regulation in relation to your discussion?
We didn't feel comfortable coming up with the solution to the problems of the north and the south driveways.
Well, regardless of the safety issues of construction, that's a regulation.
It's a regulation for new driveways. When we're reviewing a site plan, it is within our authority to try to increase the safety of the ingress and the egress.
I believe it talks about major site developments, which this is categorized as. But
We simply felt that the speed bumps were feasible and they didn't have the potential to raise other issues. Okay. Anything else? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Thank you for coming, everybody. Thank you for your patience and your comments.